All right, guys, back in the shop again. It's only been a couple days since the last episode was recorded. I'm going to cut out a new bracket to support the tensioner pulley. So we'll go over the plasma table here in a second and do that. I did get a couple of shorter belts, AX29s, which are 1 inch shorter. So I think they're 30 or 31 inches long. Why? Somebody tell me in the comments why an AX30 belt is 32 inches long. All right, so somebody tell me, and this has been kind of a gripe of mine forever, why an A29 belt is 1/2 by 31 inches. A29 is 31 inches. You tell me. AX29, it doesn't even, oh yeah, 1/2 by 31 inches. So explain to me why they would put A29 on a 31 inch belt. I don't understand it. Anyway, if you do, leave me a comment and explain it to me, because it makes no sense. Anyway, I had, as I mentioned last episode, I had AX30 belts. They seemed to be too loose. I couldn't tighten them with the tensioner. So there were a couple ways to fix that. Either change the tensioner to get more travel or get a slightly smaller belt. And I got the next smaller size, the 29, both in solid and cogged. So, and they're too small. So it's amazing 1 inch makes that much difference, but here it does. So I'm back to the AX30 belts, and I'm going to recut the tensioner bracket to give a little more travel or a little different geometry for the tensioner pulley. So that's the plan here. We're going to go back over the plasma table, cut another bracket, and I've already pulled the old one out, and we'll test fit it and see how it works. All right, I think this may work okay. We'll see. A little different shape from the previous one. hope is that this new bracket will provide a little more travel. We'll see. Do that. Looks like it will give a little more travel. We'll see. I don't know. All we can do is try it out. Alright, the bracket does clear the clutch. Okay, that looks like that looks like that's going to work. It's got the belts snug there, and there's still over 1 inch of travel. Okay, let's tack weld this one back in place. Okay, let's see what the alignment looks like. I think the plate, the bracket is in basically the same position it was last time. It's up against the tack welds from before. All right, I think everything is lined up here pretty well. Let's tack this one in position. All right, I think that's going to work fine. I still got, as tight as I can push it by hand, still got another inch of travel on the tensioner. So this bracket's going to work fine. Alignment's good. All right, I'm going to give myself a little more weld on this bracket. All right, I finally got some additional fittings that I need. So these are control valves or flow control valves, and my plan is to connect these to the cylinder. Let me draw you a picture. So I've had these flow control valves for a couple of years. I never used them on the project I bought them for. Here's what my plan is. Just say this is the cylinder. There's a piston and a rod, on the cylinder. So there's a connection where fluid can come in, another connection down here where fluid can come in or out, So obviously if fluid comes in here, it pushes the piston down and fluid flows out this side back to the tank or the reservoir. And if you push fluid in this side, it pushes the piston up and of course shortens the extension and pushes fluid out that side. So my plan is just, instead of having say this is my, the two sides, we'll say the piston rod's in the middle there, I'm going to create a bypass using one of these valves. All right, and then using connection like this, all right, this will connect there, this will connect here, and then the bypass valve will be between these, and then my existing lines will connect here and here. If I open this valve, then it creates a bypass, so fluid can flow from one side of the cylinder to the other. Now there's a little bit of difference because there's more fluid on the piston side than there is on the rod side, because the rod takes up some of the volume in here, and it's a reasonable percentage. It might be 30%. So it will potentially limit the amount, so the piston won't go as far up with the amount of fluid that's on the top pushed to the bottom. So anyway, it won't be exactly equal, but it will be enough for it to move enough to float. So the other thing is also, because there's some resistance through the valve, for fluid flowing through here, the blade will not move instantaneously. There'll be a little bit of delay, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So it kind of is a little bit of a stabilizer. So this is my way of creating basically a float or floating capability using a bypass valve. Now, I could mount this just as easily, well, perhaps as easily, at the control valve as I could at the cylinder. At the control valve, perhaps I could reach and change the position of this, close it or open it, depending on what I wanted to do. If I mount it at the cylinder, then I have to stop the tractor, get off, change them. So there's pros and cons to that. I don't know. I feel like it will look better at the cylinder than piling up more connections at the control valve. So it could be put in either place, but I'm going to put it on the cylinder, I think, just to see how it looks. So here's what has to happen. This is IPS pipe, 1/4 inch pipe thread to JIC. Here's another 1/4 inch pipe thread to JIC. Then that's a coupling to this coupling to this T. Okay. On this side, also need a coupling or a union. I'm not sure what they call it, but here. And then to the cylinder, the other connection. So it's kind of my idea right there. We'll see how this fits up. I'll kind of do a quick fit up and see, what my length is. It looks like it might be close. So we'll give it a shot. I don't like to use Teflon tape on hydraulic connections. There is a hydraulic sealant, thread sealant you can buy, but I've also got this Teflon liquid Teflon pipe thread sealant, and it says it's good to 10,000 psi on oil connections. So of course don't put any past the threads. It's pretty goopy, it's pretty sticky stuff. And this is what I'm using, is pipe thread compound. And it says, I'll read it to you, slow setting, brushable paste, dries slowly, non-hardening, withstands up to 3,000 psi on gases at temperatures from -50 to +400 degrees Fahrenheit, and 10,000 psi on liquids, -50 to +500. Use on water, steam, natural and LP gas, oils, fuels, and diluted acids. All right. Since this is 1/4 inch IPS iron pipe size, the threads are tapered. The more you tighten it down, the tighter the connection is. And in reality, you could probably just do it with the tapered threads. Theoretically, they should seal completely as you tighten them, but almost everybody uses a sealant of some sort. It limits the amount of force you need to tighten the threads down to and still ensure a complete seal. So I'm putting about, I'm going to say, anywhere from 30 to 50 foot-pounds, probably. About as tight as you would ever tighten a 3/8 inch bolt, for example. All right, so that's one. Get the other one here. A little bit dripped off. And I'm going to wipe off the excess here. A little bit like anti-seize, you get too much on here and it winds up everywhere. All right, these are done. All right, I have a 90 on here that I don't want to use. I want a straight one. It's an O-ring boss connection. Okay, this should work. Let's see. What do we have here? 11/16. Let's undo this one. This is 3/4. Let's see, this way. All right. Let's see how close we are to. I don't know how that happens, but that's almost perfectly. Almost perfect. I don't know how that happens. I don't know, that's incredible that it fit like that so well. I couldn't have done any better if I'd planned it that way. That's tight, that's tight, that's tight, that's tight. So open the valve like that, or close it like this. Forgive my head. Yeah, so these hoses were all the proper length, but I think they're going to fitting on here fine. All right, I mean, it looks a little bit odd, but I think it will work. So in the open position, the fluid will just bypass from one side to the other without having any fluid moving. Of course, if it's open like this, if you go to actuate it, it'll just bypass the cylinder. So you have to go ahead and close the valve to get the cylinder to work. All right, I think I've got the second one on now. I'm gonna change the configuration to the lift arms.
All right, and I was able to pull the cylinder out because the valve was open on the bypass. All right, so that gets rid of my float plates, or so-called float plates, float links. That's the operation of the blade. Let's see if we loosen these valves. The blade should go to the ground. Which it does. Okay, so that's the float position, just the weight of the blade on the ground. All right, and I can change the angle of the blade with this cylinder. So right now it's kind of just pushing. I can tilt the blade forward. And I just cut the fuel off. Let me put that back on. All right, and I can tell the transmissions are working because the tractor started to move a little bit while I was standing there. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up here. I think everything is working. The float function seems to be working, and the hydraulics are working, so that says the clutch is engaging and driving the transmissions because the hydraulics come off one of the transmissions. The tracks were moving a little bit, so I know the transmissions are working. So based on my testing of this same clutch installed on the motor grader, which I did, I don't know, a couple months ago, if you go back in the channel chronologically and look at that, you'll see where I put a tack on the clutch and the engine and measured the speed at which the clutch started to engage, which was about 2,000 RPM, a little bit under that, and then it's fully engaged somewhere north of 3,000 RPM. Engine runs at 3,600, so that means you run the engine at full throttle with infinitely variable speed controls of the hydrostats. That's perfect. So it gives you the ability to operate the tracks. Since there's two transmissions in this, two tracks, operate the tracks independently. So I think I accomplished my objective of getting the float function. We'll see how it works. And the clutch, I think, is working as intended. So I'll call that a win. All right, that's it for today, this episode. We'll see you next time. Next time you see this tractor, it should be pushing some dirt. So thanks for watching. See you next week.